You're listening to the BBC World Service. This is NewsHour. Sodium valproate is a powerful drug that's been prescribed for decades to people with epilepsy and bipolar disorder. But if taken during pregnancy, the drug, known as Epilim, carries risks for unborn babies, and it's estimated that tens of thousands of children around the world have been harmed after exposure to valproate in the womb, causing them physical abnormalities or developmental problems. But how aware are women of the risks? A recent survey of 2,000 women here in the UK found that 20% of them were not. Well, the European Medicines Agency is holding a safety review of the drug here in London today to see if new warnings about taking the drug during pregnancy are reaching women. And women from across Europe whose children have been harmed by valproate will give evidence. Among them is Emma Friedman, whose son Andy was diagnosed with fetal valproate syndrome, aged 3. She spoke to me from outside the venue of the hearing. I asked her if she'd been warned of the risks when she'd first been prescribed the drug.
No, I received no warnings whatsoever. I had heard from a friend that there might be a slight increased risk if taken during pregnancy. So in 1995, I went to see my neurologist and said, I'm planning to have a family one day. I've heard that this drug might not be suitable. And he reassured me and said, no, it would be fine. I then met my son's father and we decided to have a family. So again, I went to the neurologist and I say, please, can you confirm that this drug is okay for me to take during pregnancy? And he said there was a 2 to 3% chance in the general population of a physical malformation, but with valproate that increased by 2 to 3%. So there was a 4 to 9% chance of a physical malformation, and I felt that that was a risk worth taking. I felt reassured by the advice from the specialist.
I mean, some people would consider 4 to 9% quite high, but you considered it to be quite low.
If you consider that people with physical malformations are outstanding para-Olympians, they have a quality of life, they can use a prosthetic, things like a cleft lip and palate can be resolved through simple surgery. There was no mention of a neurodevelopmental defect. So I am aware of plenty of people who have physical limb difference, who are able members in society. They can make decisions and they can be independent. I was never told that there was any other risk other than that, and I felt it was a risk worth taking, considering my neurologist showed no concern and was very reassuring that I would be fine.
So when Andy was born, was there anything untoward about his appearance or dexterity?
Yes, when he was born, he was taken straight away into the neonatal intensive care to be resuscitated. He was floppy, he was jittery, he didn't make any noise. He was then put in an incubator for about 10 days and we remained in hospital for 3 weeks. It was a very emotional time for me. I had planned to have a natural birth. I had to have an epidural. I'd planned to have a home birthing room in the hospital, and it was more like an operating theatre. There were 10 people in the room, all flustering around. My blood pressure was going up and down all over the place, and it was really, really quite stressful and very, very emotional. It's just heartbreaking.
Did you immediately in your mind, seeing Andy at birth, make the connection, hear again the warnings of the neurosurgeon?
No, not at all, because I wasn't told. But then later I've had a look in my birth notes and my neurologist was in contact with my obstetrician warning about valproate teratogenicity. And on the day that my son was born, there is a note saying suspected valproate effects. All right, so that is in my birth notes. I was never told. Andy was diagnosed with it when he was 3.5 by a geneticist, and I was never told about this.
So your son's disabilities categorically linked to the taking of valproate during pregnancy?
Yes, it has been proved without a doubt in numerous evidence-based research studies. My son has neurodevelopmental delay. He is autistic. He is short-sighted. He has a hearing impairment. He has had loose limbs. We've had physiotherapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, preschool teachers, educational psychologists, geneticists, paediatricians, autism specialists. He will never live independently. He is 18 now. This year, he should have gone off to university. That's what I was expecting for my child, and instead he hasn't, and he never will. And he will never have fully functioning relationships. And I will never have achieved what I planned to achieve through good parenting, which is, after 18 years, you've created an individual with a sound, moral, ethical basis that is independent enough to look after themselves.
Emma Friedman and Sanofi, the company behind the drug, say at the public hearing we will reinforce the fact that sodium valproate is an important molecule that epileptic women continue to rely on. Doctors need a range of therapeutic options to help women with epilepsy through pregnancy. It's critical that both the risks of continuing treatment and the risks of stopping treatment are discussed before planning a pregnancy. Let's speak now to the BBC Health correspondent Jenny Woolrund, who's at the European Medical Agency inquiry for us. And this inquiry is not about establishing risks, Jenny. It's about warning, better ways of warning women about them.
That's right. So this is the first ever public hearing that the European Medicines Agency has ever held, and it's looking into whether those warnings about the risk are strong enough, because research carried out by some epilepsy charities suggests that they are not reaching many women. Now, it's the first time that many of those people affected will have the chance to tell their stories in an official public forum. It's going to hear from parents, patients, neurologists, campaign groups, and from the drug manufacturer Sanofi. People have come from various places, France, Ireland, Belgium, and of course the UK, to have their say. And some of them have been asking for new measures to be put in place to ensure that women are told about these risks. And many of those affected are also saying that they just feel very angry and let down.
What would women, or rather should women listening to this who might be on epilepsy medication do?
Well, the medicines watchdog here in the UK, the MHRA, says it's important that women don't stop taking it without talking to their doctor, and that when considering the risks of valproate, that it's important to remember that untreated bipolar disorder or epilepsy can carry serious risks. So the message is, don't do anything unless you've spoken to your doctor first.
And this inquiry will conclude with similar kinds of recommendations, would you imagine?
Well, it's going to, in a week's time, we'll get a report making recommendations based on what is said today. That will feed into a review by the European Medicines Agency, which is due out in December, into the adequacy of these safety warnings. But many families in the UK, they're calling for a full public inquiry as well. Some of them had to abandon a court case against the manufacturer Sanofi in 2010 after losing their legal aid. In France, 1,200 families are preparing to sue Sanofi, and the French government is supporting that legal action and has set aside €10 million to compensate them.
Jenny, many thanks. That was the BBC's health correspondent Jenny Woolrund speaking from central London.